Hi, Mr. Ross. Thank you so much for coming in today.
No problem. I'm very happy to be here.
Let's get started. How old were you when you went off to war? How did this affect you?
I went off to war when I was 18 years old. Both my brothers went to war as well. Fighting on the battlefield at such a young age really affected me physically and mentally. I witnessed some of my best friends die right in front of me. It was truly traumatizing, and it still affects me to this day.
How long were you on the battlefield for?
I was fighting for the first 2 years, then got sent home for a few months, then was sent back due to conscription.
What is your worst memory from fighting on the field in World War I?
Fighting on the battlefield was very brutal as it was emotionally and physically draining. My worst memory was when I witnessed my older brother being shot to death. This moment still haunts me and is engraved in my memory to this day.
What were you doing prior to the war? Did you have any future plans for your education?
I had just graduated high school with my twin brother. I was looking forward to starting my engineering program at Queen's University. But a couple of weeks before the year started, World War I broke out, and along with my brothers and friends, chose to go and fight for our country.
Was it hard for you to drop everything you've worked for and go off to war?
Yes, it was very difficult to drop my education and lifelong dream to become an engineer. I believed it was my duty to sacrifice everything to fight for my country because it was a man's job to fight.
What was life like after the war? How did it affect you?
Life after the war was very challenging. I suffered from PTSD for many years. Prior to the war, I was planning to go on into engineering, but I was not able to go into university after the war. I knew I needed a job to provide for my family, so I started working with my dad in the family business.
How did your family cope with the loss of your brother? When was it most difficult?
After my twin and I returned from the war, we held a funeral for my older brother. It was very hard for my mom because they were very close, and she had lost her dad at a young age while he was fighting as well. It will never be easy, and it will never be the same without him here. But day by day, we are trying to cope.
Why did you feel it was necessary to enter the war when you were not forced to?
My older brother and my twin both wanted to fight to represent the country because they did not have future plans for their education. With both of them going off to war, I was influenced to go as well because I felt I needed to fulfill my expectations of being a strong man.
Do you regret giving up your education to fight for your country? If so, why?
Yes, I do regret throwing away the education that I worked very hard for. I was proud of my success as I was the only one in my family who graduated from high school and got accepted to a good university. But I am glad I got to be by my brother's side during his last few days with us.
How was it working for your family business after the war?
For the first few years, my dad was in charge and my twin and I helped out. 2 years after working there, on August 3rd, 1920, my father died of a stroke. This was very hard for my family and I, as it was just my twin, my mom, and I left. Since I was the only one with a high school education, I took over the business. It was very challenging at first without my father by my side, but with my brother's help and my father's passed on knowledge, we coped.
What was your job in the war? Were you in the Navy, the Air Forces, or the Armed Forces?
Both my brothers and I were in the armed forces. There was very little training involved, but I was good with weapons since my family was into hunting. My dad taught me how to shoot my first gun when I was only 11 years old.
What were the conditions like on the battlefield? How was it?
The conditions were awful. We got barely any rest, and we rarely ate. I was in the trenches very often, and the conditions in there were horrible. It was muddy and smelly with multiple dead bodies and blood everywhere. From being in the trenches for days, it was very common to get diseases such as lice and trench foot due to terrible conditions. It was very common to see rodents and bugs in the trenches because of the mass numbers of dead bodies.
What is a typical day like in the trenches? How long were you in the trenches?
You never knew how long you would be in the trenches for. It would range from hours to days. The longest period I spent in the trenches was 6 days and 5 nights.
What is one word you would use to describe your time fighting in the war?
That is a hard question, but I would have to say traumatic. My whole experience fighting was very traumatic, and I never knew if it was going to be my last day on earth. I'll never forget what I saw, learned, and experienced.
Thank you so much for letting us interview you. Have a good day and thank you for your service.
No problem. It was my pleasure.